with Word of Faith. Let's get started. Hello, everyone on the line. Welcome to Family Restoration and Healing Center's COVID-19 Coping Tips series. I'm Joyce Jones. Today, we're talking about parent-child communication, how to talk to your kids about tough topics. And it's awesome that, we'll be talking from a Christian counseling perspective. We really care about the spirit, your spiritual, as well as your physical being. We're joined today by Steve Osterhout, a licensed clinical social worker and counselor with Safe Harbor Christian Counseling. We also have Brianna Dance, a youth ambassador for Family Restoration and Healing Center. So, this past year has been, it's brought us a lot of tough issues to address with our youth, in addition to ongoing life stress. We've had the pandemic stress with homeschooling, work from home, a lot of fears and losses during this time. In addition to that, we've had at the forefront of our nation major issues of social injustice, racism, political divide. And many of these issues have created family divide and even church divide. And this is a lot, but our goal is to discuss how to talk to our kids about these topics. And so thanks again, Steve, for joining us and giving us some great insight from your perspective. I know you work with, families and families of all races. So, let's start with what could be the impact of this past year on our children's mental health?
Well, first of all, Joyce, it is a pleasure to be here, and I'm also happy to see that actually it looks like Tamia Pleasance is also on the call, and so I'm excited she's here as well. So we weren't sure if she was going to be able to join us, but so maybe I'll hand it back over to you to introduce her as well, and then we can respond to the question.
Oh, awesome! Thank you. Hi, Tamia. Tamia Pleasance is one of our partners with Family Restoration and Healing Center, and she is a licensed clinical social worker with NILU Therapeutics. So thank you so much, Tamia, for joining us. I heard you weren't feeling well. You just received your COVID-19 vaccination, and we know how that for some people are, having them not feeling well afterwards. So thank you for joining.
Yeah. And I'm also, Tamia, I'm so happy to have you here. I hope you feel better soon, but I've already benefited so much from your input from the previous workshops we've had here so far. So thank you for being here. So, but this past year's been rough. It's been so hard on in so many ways, and really on all of us in different ways. And it has impacted our kids just in ways that are unique to children. And it, of course, has impacted us as parents as well, and as adults. But I think some of the things to kind of look for in our kids are increases in struggles with things like anxiety, depression, addictive patterns of behavior, whether it's substances. I was reading an article just recently that vaping is increasing significantly among high school students. So it's something to kind of keep in mind. Also, in terms of behavioral addictions, like, really throwing yourself into social media or to gaming, the types of things that kind of contribute to withdrawing from interacting with others in the real world. It's really been hard, of course, this year with social distancing, physical distancing, and social isolation. And the end result is kids are in a place where it's easy to gravitate toward other types of escape or withdrawal. And Of course, there's some advantages in today's society where kids can interact through social networking or gaming or those types of things. But frankly, I'm a big believer. Maybe I'm old school, I don't know, but I'm a big believer that being with people is different than being connected through technology. So, but I think those are some of the things to kind of watch for as an impact.
Oh, good, thanks. That gives a good insight into looking at the different things that we could identify in people that would help us find out ways we could help them, when we see these certain behaviors. And, right now with the social distancing, that adds to, just a small level of complexity in, identifying if something's really going on. How do we know the warning signs? What are the warning signs that, every parent should look for in their child to signal that it's time to get help with for their mental health, versus just seeing these things as normal for normal for teen behavior. What are the warning signs? And Tamia, I'll give that to you.
Sure. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I'm going to speak in general, right? Because everybody, has their own kind of nuances in terms of personalities and behavior. But I think any type of change that you're noticing, whether if you do have a teen that typically is a little bit more talkative, a little bit more engaging, and then you find that they're no longer doing those things. I think that's a key sign, right? Any differences that you're noticing. Sleeping habits and eating habits are also big key indicators that maybe something is going on. Um, and sometimes even just like facial expressions, right? I know with teenagers it can be hard because they kind of have this very flat affect in general. They very rarely skip into the living room or kitchen and being like, more pancakes please, right? Like it's just sort of this zombie like moaning and groaning. But I think that any changes to that are key signs that as a caregiver, I may need to ask them, hey, is something going on? And I was talking yesterday with the youth about sometimes when we feel cornered, right? Like we'll hold a lot of that tension in our bodies. And when we're tense, there's not a lot of words. And I get it. Teenagers don't use a lot of words anyway. But if as an adult, you're really wanting to find out what's going on, it's going to be harder if you're like, open your mouth, use your words, tell me what's happening, right? Because you're kind of creating, maybe a little bit more tension that's being felt in the kids or in the teenager's body. And when that's happening, they're in a fight or a flight mode or a shutdown mode, which means that they're not good. There's going to be even less words, which are more frustrating, right? Because you're like, if you open your mouth and you tell me what's happening, I can help you. But a lot of times it's just hard. It's hard for us to find the words, right? So, imagine somebody who their brain is still developing, right? And so most teenagers, our brains aren't fully developed until we're 25 years old, right? So expecting that a 17-year-old, a 14-year-old, a 7-year-old is going to be able to explain everything that's happening, I think is going to create a bigger miscommunication. And so I think that, you can tell if somebody is pulling back, right? And so it's just looking for those things. And sometimes they're really big and sometimes they're really subtle, right? But, if you're buying everybody's favorite snack and you're noticing wow, like these Oreo cookies have been here for 2 days and they usually don't last 2 hours, then maybe that even can be a sign that there might be something going on, right? Or vice versa, right? I bought these and typically nobody eats them but me. And then all of a sudden, like they're gone. What's happening? Again, with teenagers, oversleeping already can be an issue. But I think that there's a difference between I'm just really tired because I've been doing a lot throughout the day, and Zoom takes a lot out of us. But there's a difference between like I literally have no energy to do the things that I would normally do, and I just want to stay in bed and shut the world out. So I think that there's a difference in energy when that happens, and those are some of those key signs that we can look out for. If we're trying to notice those warning signs that maybe I may need to step in differently or get a little bit of extra help.
I think that's really good because we just had a session with the youth and they talked about, we asked them, what would you want your parents to know or adults to know? And they said that they are, the resounding common theme was that they are experiencing stress as well. So to me, you talked about, they may not open their mouths about certain things. They may, and it's probably because they don't have the words, but they may not have the space for it. What we've seen from what some of their responses is that we may need to, parents and our adults may need to give them the space to speak up, to open their mouths, letting them know that we understand that they're experiencing stress and anxiety. That's what I received from that conversation with some of the youth. And maybe I'll ask you, Steve, what did you hear from that session as well?
Yeah, I heard some of those same themes. I remember, I forget which youth it was, but very eloquently said, yeah, we're stressed out, and we're not worrying about bills and, getting to work and all those kinds of things, but we're really, really stressed out. And I think that's a normal, experience that kids have these days. And on top of that, you throw in all the things from this past year, and the stressors have just been increasing exponentially for kids. And then you add in, there's this formula that I kind of keep in the back of my mind that sometimes can be helpful. When we have an increase in stressors and a decrease in supports, that equals some sort of crisis event. And when you think about this past year, there have been increases in stresses for our kids and decreases in supports because of the lack of connectedness and so on. And I think as adults, we're dealing with the same thing. And the key thing is to make sure that those crisis types of situations aren't driving everything in our lives, all the experiences that we have. And, so the solution really is decrease supports, increase support, or decrease demands and increase supports, which can be a really challenging thing to do. That's why I love what church provides. Provides community, it provides hope, it provides opportunities to not stay in that crisis place, provides a way and a means to find a way through those difficult times, and that faith journey is so important. I just wanted to make a comment too that as parents, we feel such a burning and huge responsibility to parent our children well. And sometimes that can almost get in the way of having relationship with our children, because it's that felt responsibility to parent well, to guide and direct. And adolescents are developmentally at a place where they're trying to figure out how to transition from being, part of a family to being independent. And that's part of that developmental process. So unfortunately, there's kind of a natural disconnect that can happen with parents. The really awesome thing is there are ways to have both, to encourage kids to become more and more independent, and while at the same time creating opportunities for this connectedness. Because as parents, we're probably, I think it's safe to say, even with our adolescents, the largest support that they have, you know, the greatest guide that they have to move toward places of truth as they apply those truths to their lives. So, but it's just really important to keep in mind that that relation component in our parenting is so critically important. And sometimes we have to be patient as parents as well, because listen, you know, my kids aren't young anymore, but they were at one point, adolescents. It's hard, you know, when, you know, you're getting an attitude all the time and, you know, they don't want to talk to you and all those kinds of things. It is hard. And that's, I don't know about you all, but that's when I pray really hard. It's like, God help me with this, because I not a clue. So.
Yes, yes, that is so true. We're praying for the help, and that is another very good tip to pray, to seek God's guidance in how we talk to our kids. And that's what we're talking about right now. How do we talk to our kids about tough topics? You know, this pandemic has brought on, you know, a loss for loved ones. You know, how do we talk to our kids about that? You know, and their feelings around that. Uh, Maybe I'll ask you to give us a little bit, Pastor Bradford, uh, guidance on, you know, what can you tell our parents on the line about how to talk to their kids about tough topics when it comes to, you know, a loss in their family?
I think just like with any tough topic, for parents, we have to be available, right? Oftentimes, we can't control when and where the conversation emerges. I know oftentimes we want to control, we want to ask the question and get an immediate response.
Mm.
But oftentimes, our children, as with our adults, right? They need to get into a space where they feel safe enough to share. And often it comes when triggered by something else. Um, when 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 Noelle died, our daughter, one thing that helped my son was that he opened up. It was months later when her door to her room was open. Like it hadn't been open since she passed, but coming and sweeping the stairs and looking up and seeing the door open triggered a conversation that needed to be had. And so part of that is making ourselves available and then letting them lead it and get out their frustration however they need to. In other words, don't try to control their expression. Let them get out. And it may come out real harsh. It may come out as anger. It may come out as frustration. It may eventually lead to tears, but you want them to be released of it because the weight of it is what has been hurting them. And when they finally get to that space, the biggest barrier oftentimes is us in trying to control the conversation or the response. One of the worst things we can do is try to control how they want to respond and express. We have to be open to the rawness of what they're feeling because oftentimes they can't put it into words because that's why they haven't done it prior to that point.
That's key. That you know, just understanding that they, you know, this is a raw and real situation when you're talking about, you know, loss of life in your family and friends. And we do not have, you may not have the words. You will not have the answers for them, and that's fine. Tamia, do you have any tips to give us for, you know, communicating to the kids in this way?
Yeah, just I'm kind of piggybacking off of Steve and Pastor B. You know, when Steve talked about, you know, sometimes that good parenting can get in the way, you know, and that control, right? Because when we control it, then there are no surprises. But I think there is so much power in saying words like, I don't know either. Um, Me too, right? Like, I don't have the words, I don't understand either. But just holding that space and saying, we can get through this together, right? Because, I know, again, when I've experienced loss, I wasn't looking for friends or, people that were connected to me to give me an answer. I think just looking up and seeing that there's somebody just sitting next to me and they're not saying anything, was just so much more supportive and powerful than all of the words that they ever could have or given me. And so I think, they really hit it on the head when, saying stuff like, I don't know either, or this hurts me too. I think, being vulnerable, right? And a lot of times when we want to be a good parent, there isn't room for our true feelings to be in it. There isn't room for our vulnerability, right? Because we still see that as a weakness, right? I got to be a strong man or a strong woman, right? I have to show them my strength in being a parent. And I think that sometimes that can be such a disservice because then they don't ever get the skill on how to handle those tough situations. And they always think, I got to be strong. And wow, I'm not being strong, so I must be failing. And, of course, that's not the message that we intended to give them, but that's the takeaway. And so I think there's so much strength in just being vulnerable. I think that's one of the bravest things that as adults we can give our kids, and just saying, yeah, I get why you're upset. Yeah, I'm angry too.
Yeah,
Right. And then not being afraid of those emotions, even though, like Pastor B said, sometimes they show up really big, but just not being afraid and meeting that really big emotion with love and compassion. Yeah, I see your anger and I'm right here for it.
right.
I
No.
see your sadness and I'm right here for it.
Mhm.
And so I think just tapping into our own vulnerability, I think will speak volumes when we're trying to work with our kids, with our teens, with our youngsters, and helping them to understand just all the things that are going on in the world. That, of course, if we could shield them from it, right? Like, I have a 19-month-old, right? Going on 19 years sometimes, but I have a 19-month-old. And there's so many things I just want to shield her from.
Mm.
But I know that there's going to come a time where I don't have all the answers, but man, we'll have to figure it out together. And I think that's the best gift that I can give her.
Yes.
Can I throw in a point in there while we're on that topic of being like vulnerable and open? Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I think as adults, like looking at your kids, you see them like as your child, as not a friend. And I think that like, being a child, or I'm not a child anymore, I'm 21, but being young, I know that, when looking at my parents, they're like, I used to get told a lot, like, I'm not your friend, I'm your parent. I want to be your parent, not your friend. So it's hard to draw that line, but I think that kids, what we miss is that kids need a friend. Friends are real, friends are honest, friends are open, and friends are someone that you can talk to. And I think that kind of ties together with everyone that what everyone's been saying, with being open with your child, telling them like you may not know the answer, but you're showing your emotions, you're showing how vulnerable you can be, you're showing that you're a real human being, that you're not just like the hawk and strong and like always knowing the answer and everything. And I think that being a friend to your child is a big thing as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Brianna. That's our youth ambassador. She joined us yesterday when we talked with the kids. And go ahead, Steve. I see that you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I love this conversation. I really do. It's so important because that parental role is tricky because we need to guide and direct, and we need to be in a position of authority and hierarchy. But there's also opportunity for this profound intimacy that happens between parents and children. And I think being real and being genuine and being authentic, all of those kinds of things we can bring into our relationship with our kids. I remember one time, as a kid myself, when my dad was he apologized for something. It kind of blew me away. It's like, that's my dad, but he apologized, and I really appreciated his willingness to do that. I probably remember that as much as anything else I do in our relationship, that one incident. But I wanted to share a couple of things because I love communication. I love listening. It's so, so, so important. And I think the key to communication starts with listening. And there are two passages that I love to go to in scripture that help with this. The first one, and we know both of these passages, but it's James 1:19. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. Sometimes I personalize that a little bit, and I hope that's okay to do that, because I don't struggle so much with anger and getting upset in that kind of way, because I'm kind of relaxed a lot of times, but I can be dismissive. I can be just kind of not really willing to consider the possibility of what somebody's saying has validity, so I have to struggle with that. But when you're quick to listen, you're making this decision to listen first, to communicate understanding, which I think is what listening is really all about. I always, kind of remind people that communicating understanding is not the same thing as communicating agreement, but a lot of times we can communicate and convince somebody that we understand, then we have opportunity to really have a dialogue. And that's that when we get to that point, then we can share thoughts and perceptions and beliefs and ideas and try to see the same situation from different points of view. So be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. The other one that I really love a lot is Proverbs 15:1. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up dissension. So what is a gentle answer? And Pastor B, you said something just a moment ago that really kind of got my attention, because I think a gentle answer a lot of times looks like listening, not just for content of what somebody's saying, but listening for that emotion, that affect. When you can share with somebody, like, the kids that were talking to us yesterday, they're stressed out, as parents, like, oh, my goodness, that you must be so overwhelmed by trying to get this assignment done, this paper that you have to write. It must be so hard to not be able to hang out with your friends. It must be such a heavy burden to be hearing all this stuff on social media about all the things happening in our world that are so difficult to manage. And when you can acknowledge the anxiety and the fear and the, sometimes even despair that we experience, that a child may be experiencing, that's just powerful stuff. So anyway, I just want to add my 2 cents on there.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you so much for that. And I want to open it up for any questions from those on the line. Please send in the chat, send your question through the chat, and we'll make sure that we ask. But that was, really, really good, Steve, to mention that the kids are really experiencing a lot of what adults are experiencing. They're there most of the time to feel the spirit in the room that's going on. So it's they're experiencing it as well. So just also going to the issues that's going on now in the world, and where the kids are seeing it on social media, witnessing it sometimes firsthand, seeing it on the news, this racial divide, this political divide. How do we empower our youth without teaching them to continue to hate? So I want to ask that question. Tamia, did you want to start us off on that discussion?
Yeah, I will do my best. I wish I had an answer. I wish I had, follow these 3 steps and we can end racism. Follow these 3 steps and poverty will be no more. It's hard. And I think I have to revert back to what I was saying before about being honest. I think somebody said authentic and, and confident in saying, you know what, I don't know. Because sometimes I do feel angry about what I see on the news or what I've experienced in my own personal life. Um, but I think we do have to, show and model how we rely on our faith and how, Holy Spirit has shut my mouth many a times. Or I see something on social media and I have typed a whole paragraph and, that Holy Spirit is like, do not push that send button. And it's just like erase, 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 And so I think that again, it's providing that example and saying that, yeah, sometimes I just want to go out and scream, right? About all the injustices that I'm seeing, but there's a different way. And I am open to figuring that out. I love that Steve is here. And, I love that he has put himself in the midst of, this is a beautiful sea of brown and Black people right here. And so, being able to sit here, on a Sunday morning and have this conversation, right? And be part of this conversation. I think that's the start, right? And saying, I don't know, I can't speak for everybody. I'll speak for me, right? And then I invite the other person to speak. And so I think that we have to model, what we would really do in those real life situations in order to have that trickle down to our kids so they can model, right? How to have those hard conversations, those uncomfortable conversations. And I think you said it beautifully, Steve, that just because I show that I understand doesn't mean that I'm in agreement, right? It doesn't mean that I'm co-signing on what you're saying or what you're doing, but I'm just letting you know that I can see your point of view. Oh, I hear what you're saying. I still don't agree, right? But I can see why, from your perspective, you see it that way. And that takes a maturity that, that's a refinement that we all have to go through. And again, I think that oftentimes I'll hear like, from the pulpit, we have to be the first partakers. I think, in these opportunities, we have to be the first partakers, right? I have to see um, my hard opportunities as growth, so then I can trickle that down to my kids, right? And then even to, some of my family members that on the outside they look like adults, but on the inside they're still really kids, right? So I can model for them. And I think that that is probably one of the best ways to have that hard conversation. Same as we were talking about vulnerability. I don't know where this conversation is going to go, right? But I'm confident that one, I can pray the Holy Spirit in the midst of this and say, just guide us, show us wisdom, us where we need to go in this, right? Because I'm starting out this conversation, not this one, but I'm starting out a conversation and I'm really mad, right? And I really want to do things out of my anger, but I'm gonna pull on my faith and I'm gonna trust that I'm going somewhere with this. And
Yeah.
so going back to let me be slow to speak and slow to anger. One of the things that I use just in my own counseling sessions is the acronym WAIT. Why am I talking? Right. And so sometimes I got to remind myself because I'll have these inklings. Oh, I want to say this. Just wait. Why am I talking? And then
Yes.
a lot of times after I wait, then I'm like, oh, see, if I would have jumped in, I would have taken the conversation way off course.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I like that. Just wait. And in that waiting, as Christians, as believers, we believe in prayer. Wait and pray. Wait and pray. Prayer is where you get your answers. And, I've heard my pastor would say, prayer is the answer to prayers. So I think that was awesome. I think that was awesome. And Steve, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. I would love to. there's so much opportunity for healing, certainly in personal relationships, but also as a society. One thing I've learned as a counselor is that when there's woundedness and there's pain, that perpetuates the intensity of emotion and thought and so on. And it's absolutely understandable. You might have noticed I'm an older white guy, okay, and I'm thankful for my heritage and so on. And I think in a lot of ways, there's the kind of the realization that and I'm not only a white guy, but I'm a white guy. So there's this, I've had privilege and opportunity that other people don't have. And I think, so a role that I can play in that is to try to get into conversation and dialogue with people that are similar to my upbringing and my background, and try to engage in listening well and having conversation and pursuing truth. And looking again for opportunities for healing, in relationships and family. It's interesting because, certainly this past year has been interesting for all of us. It certainly has created division and differences of opinion about, do you get the COVID shot? Do you not get it? Politics, I don't even want to go there, okay? It's been so divisive in this past year. And I think in a lot of ways, again, within the context of what we can do to help our kids deal with this, a lot of it's through modeling how we deal with this. And I agree with what Tamia was saying, that there's opportunity to demonstrate the greatest commandment, which is the greatest commandment for a reason, right? I like the one, that's presented in Luke 10, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. It's deemed the greatest for so many reasons. I grew up going to church. I grew up hearing that, and I thought, oh yeah, love God and love other people. I got it. It's so profound. It's so profound. The longer I'm walking on this earth, I think I'm just starting to understand how profoundly important it is to love in that kind of a way. God invites us into an intimate relationship with him, and he teaches us how to have an intimate relationship with one another, regardless of where we've come from, and regardless of how old we are, and regardless of so many factors. There's great opportunity to engage in a process that leads to healing. So I'm excited. Well, we're also, we've also learned that difficult times they're challenging, they're difficult. Like we were talking about, demands, decrease in supports, crisis. But through that tribulation, of course, then challenge, there's opportunity to develop steadfastness, to develop the opportunity to become the men and women, boys and girls that God has designed us to be, to free us from so many things that have gotten in the way of that process. So I'm excited. As much as this is a daunting time, to me, this is a time of great opportunity, in the coming days. And my hope is that each of us can kind of contribute to that opportunity that leads to family healing and restoration and overcoming the difficulties that we've had. So.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Steve. Yes, it is very hard. All of the things that all of us are dealing with during this pandemic, the racial unrest, losing a loved one, all of that is compounded. We do have a question here. Let's see. It's someone asking about her 15-year-old granddaughter who has just lost her mother. Should she seek counseling for her? So I believe it's a grandmother that's asking, should she seek counseling for her? Tamia, did you want to answer that?
I think that, counseling should never be forced, right? So maybe inviting, as we pointed out, is there really a such thing as too much support, especially during hard times. And so I think that, showing that, hey, I'm right here with you, I support you. And as an additional support, I'd like to invite you to, talk it out in this kind of space because it has value. And just see if she's ready, because again, if it's forced, then it can be seen as a punishment. And counseling is just another support. Counseling is just another road to healing on this side of heaven. So I think that more so than making her go, see if inviting her to go, and what you get from that.
Thank you. I have someone that mentioned that their 14-year-old daughter has a lot of anger because of what's going on in the world right now. I think we gave a lot of good information and tips on helping your daughter, but is there any additional that you want to add, to Mia or Steve?
Yeah, I would just reiterate, again, putting into practice Proverbs 15:1, that gentle answer. If you can really hear her anger and convince her that you understand her anger, a lot of times that helps to bring down the intensity of that anger, so that you can have conversations which ultimately lead to decisions about what to do with the perception of injustice, because there is injustice and there's, it is angry and it's very understandable. And so what do we do with this? What do we do to communicate in such a way that promotes the opportunity for change? One of the things that I think about oftentimes is helping people communicate these really important things in ways that can be heard. And that can be in a variety of packages, I suppose, but it's processing through so that there's a way to express in a helpful, constructive way where that anger is coming from. So, but that gentle answer, I think, is a key component, and really listening to the anger and acknowledging, hey, I hear you. Yeah, you're angry, and I understand that.
Yes, I hear you. That's I think it'll go a long way with kids, because they're always saying, you don't hear me, you don't see me, you don't understand. Pastor B, I'd like to ask you to answer that question. Do you have anything to add for the person that was asking this question about her daughter and her anger, just surrounding all that's going on right now?
I think one of the biggest things, as well as what has already been mentioned, is continuing to be present, continuing to be there, and not allow the anger, or not feel or internalize that the anger is directed at you, right? The anger is directed at the situation. And so however it comes out, making sure that we always acknowledge that it's not a personal attack. It is just simply an expression. And so just being there. I mean, Steve was amazing. Just being there, just sitting with them and allow them to release it. And maybe I would say even share in transparency some of your angers and how strategies you've dealt with, not forcing them into that strategy, but just saying, I deal with this, I wrestle with this, I'm going through this, and this is what I'm doing, as just a possibility. But to show your humanity in the situation, like Tamia said, you're not the Hulk, right? You don't have, no, that was Brianna. You don't have to, whoever it was who you're not the Hulk, right? You're not Superman, Superwoman. And I think oftentimes that's who we try to portray to our children, not realizing sometimes they're vocalizing exactly what we're feeling. They're our children. So they have the same DNA. So the same stuff that triggers us triggers them. And I think, and really the other piece is sometimes we silently applaud their ability to say what we are uncomfortable saying. They say it but we're like, yes, you said it, but I can't say it, so I have to keep a straight face, and I gotta, but they're saying it. So I think celebrating their saying it, and then showing them your own stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I have like an idea that might help, make it easier to have the conversation. Me growing up in our household, my mom told me and my little brother when we were really young, she was like, okay, so I want you guys to be able to talk to us. I want you to like express how you're feeling. So we're gonna set up this thing. It's called open conversation. So if we say that, if we go to our parents and I say, okay, mom, open conversation, she automatically knows like I won't get in trouble for anything that I say. She's here to listen. She's not gonna talk. She's just gonna listen first. Like you guys are saying, like, listen first and then maybe say something. She has that just clear slate. We're gonna talk about whatever. She doesn't know what's coming, but we're gonna talk about it. So I think maybe setting something like that in your own household, maybe sitting down with your kids and being like, right now, this world is crazy. Talk to me. This may feel weird, but I want to know what you're feeling like. Having the idea of safe space is kind of like what you want your kids to be invited to, because having that safe space is like, okay, I can say what I need to say. I can come home and let out my frustration, because I'm not even a mad person. Like anyone who knows me knows I do not get mad for anything. It takes a lot to get me even irritated. But this world, I was furious with the things that are happening with last year and all that stuff. And having that safe space to come home and be like, mom, open conversation. Okay. So like I would just express how I'm feeling, let it all out. And she'd even look at me like, whoa, like who are you? Because you never get mad. But it felt good to talk it out. And she would make jokes to make me feel better, laugh, like being open and being honest. And then even my dad, when I would have conversations with him, he would tell me too, like having that vulnerability. He'd be like, yeah, when I was little, I had to go through something like this and it made me frustrated. And now seeing this again makes me frustrated. We went down to the Black Lives Matter Plaza they just, made with the street and all that. And seeing him like vulnerable, he was crying, looking around what's going on, seeing the change that are trying to cure. Like seeing that made me like, wow, like they're real people. This vulnerable safe space that we all created, it makes you want to talk to your parents, express how you feel. So I guess like setting up something like that, a system in your house. So maybe once a month you sit down and kind of talk about it. Or once a week you kind of have this like completely different atmosphere in the house, even if you're mad at each other or whatever goes on. Because I know our household is crazy, but having that like moment to be like, okay, everything out the window, let's just sit here and talk about what's going on. Let me see how you're feeling and see what's going on in your mind. I think that's a good idea to maybe try and incorporate into your like house too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that all of what was just said ties into what Tamia was saying, and that was, don't be afraid of your emotions. Don't be afraid of your emotions. And allow our kids, don't be afraid of their emotions. Allow them to express it. This is awesome. I'm really, really happy and excited as well as you expressed, Steve. Really excited about talking about this and communicating. Are there any other comments or questions as we wrap this up? I'm going to look at the chat here to see if there's any questions that are coming in. Go ahead.
I think I want to just give a brief example of the other side. Sure. Last night, I'm with my son and his friends, and something triggers one of them that takes them back to 5 or 6 years ago. And it starts off with him seeing somebody, and the only way he knew how to handle it was to punch a wall, right? So calm down. He had been drinking because that's how he numbs, right? And then emotions, because he starts processing what's going on, but he's never had anybody to listen to him. So as we're sitting there listening to him, he gets madder. He gets madder. He gets madder. angrier, I guess you say dogs get mad. He gets angrier, right? Then we see other sides because it's been unresolved stuff. And the old adage is pressure busts pipes. So by the time he's finished, they take him outside. He gets angrier, doesn't want to be around anybody. And before you know it, he has punched his hand through car glasses, like just randomly. So it's an explosion that comes on the other side of unaddressed issue. And so because he's never had the space to ever address, he's always internalized. And because at this point, the trigger, there was only space for outward release, it came out in a way that couldn't have been contained, but possibly could have been prevented over time if there were structures in place to allow for this alleviation of emotion. So that's why we're encouraging this with parents or with those who have relationships, because it doesn't always have to be a parent. Sometimes it's a peer or auntie or a mentor who they feel safe enough with to open up to, and then allow them the space to be able to release it. And I just think that's what could happen if it doesn't take place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Are there any other questions that anyone have? If you do, please put it in the chat. We'll ask that right away before we close out. Just giving a moment for those that want to submit a question. But I think this was very, very helpful. Thank you so much to our therapists on the line, Steve and Tamia. We talked about how to communicate with our kids. We've given really good tips to our parents, really allowing them to talk, to express their feelings, not being afraid of our emotions, their emotions. We talked about creating creative ways to manage our stress and anxiety, and allowing a safe place to discuss what's, on our minds, to discuss what our kids are going through, to continue to give them that safe place and talk to them about praying, talking to others in their community. We have the church, reminding them that there are people that they can go to at the church, in their families. And I think that's another thing that we should say as well. Talk to your kids about finding the people around them that they feel safe to talk to. It could be an aunt, an uncle, it could be a minister. So, talk to your kids about the people around them that they feel safe to talk to. Of course, they can talk to you, their parents, but you want to give them that space to find someone close to them an adult that they could talk to as well. Let's see, do we have another question here? I don't think so. How can we deal with our kids' behavior about not being in school? I see anger, especially in middle school. Steve, do you have an answer for that person?
Oh my goodness, it's such a huge issue. It's so hard. One of the things I think has been really challenging especially for our kids, but really for all of us in this last year with COVID has been, there's so much unknown. What are the rules? When do you wear a mask? When do you not wear a mask? Should I get the vaccine? Should I not get the vaccine? For kids, it's like, how do I figure out all this technology stuff? Oh, by the way, teachers are kind of freaking out with that as well. It's been so hard. I have a number of teachers that I get to talk to on a regular basis. And so we need to pray for a lot of people. But I think that uncertainty, that unknown kind of brings about the increase in a variety of emotions, such as anxiety or anger. And I'm going to, talk a little bit about maybe gender stuff. Sometimes different kids, I found especially boys have a tendency to express their anxiety more through irritation, frustration, anger, because I don't know, there are a lot of different reasons for that. But I think my hunch is that a lot of times it's that uncertainty that really fuels a lot of that emotional expression, and to some degree, there's not an easy answer to that because there's still a tremendous amount of uncertainty about, what to expect the next week. And, we were talking a little bit again yesterday about how much, kids have missed out on things, routine things like dances and proms and graduations and stuff that are these rites of passage, that like the first day in sixth grade. I have a kid that I get to hang out with some. His first day of sixth grade was virtual. Now, here he is midstream and he's got to try to figure out how to negotiate going to school a couple days a week. It's so many new uncertain things, and it just wreaks havoc on our kids, and it's hard. So kind of full circle, just trying to be a listening ear and care and try to help guide them through. I don't know, I think as parents a lot of times feel kind of helpless because we can't create certainty in that uncertainty because we don't know either. We're just figuring it out as well. So
right. You're trying to figure it out.
Can I jump in on this one too?
Absolutely.
I feel like this question really relates to what we talked about yesterday with the kids, with remembering as adults that they have stress too. Like stress isn't just one of those emotions that come once you turn 21 and it happens to be there. Like it's an everyone thing. Anyone can get stressed out. So I think remembering that they're stressed out and being there for them in that time of being stressed out, like it don't, Pastor V and Steve and Tamia have saying like it may come out in different ways, but being there and like listening for them and remembering, or maybe even creating a little like getaway for them. We talked about that too, with like ways that they try to feel better was to take a break, stop, maybe go outside and play, get some tea. That's some of the ideas that they were saying that they would try to do. So maybe creating that thing. Maybe if you see them stressing out, just be like, hey, hold on, take a break, come with me real quick, let's go on a walk. Or like, hey, come downstairs real quick, let's watch a movie. Even though it may like seem like, whoa, I'm taking them out of school, wait, like no, they need like, honestly, that little break for them may help them way more than keeping them in for that extra hour and all that. So I definitely think, if there's a lot of anger in them, maybe sit down with them and have that open conversation too. Be like, hey, what's going on? Do you need more breaks? What can I do to help you? Because I don't know what to do. So tell me what I can do to help you. I think that would be a really good thing to kind of just incorporate.
Oh, yes. Tell me what I could do to help you. That's such a
Absolutely. I
simple.
was just going to say together, right? Like
Yes.
figure it out together.
Yes, absolutely. I love it. Just ask them. Kids, and that's what they want you to ask them how they're feeling, what they want. What is the
I was definitely
need
going
to
to say
help
that
them?
too. Like
Yeah.
a lot of times we may not show it, but I want you to come here, come ask me, come talk to me. Like I'm a very kind of closed off person, except for when I need that like open conversation moment. But knowing like my mom will still come in and be like, hey, like you good? Like what's going on? I'll be like, like yeah, like now I have that, because maybe they don't want to come to you. Maybe they want you to come to them and say like, hey, you good? Like, this may be a little weird, but I want to check in on you real quick. Like, just tell me what's going on. And they have that moment like, wow, yeah, I kind of been feeling a little weird. Thanks for asking that. And then maybe that can start a conversation.
Absolutely. Are there any kids on the line that like to ask a question, chime in? I want to give you a moment to do so. And if you want to just send it in the chat, totally fine as well. Totally fine as well. Okay. And so Pastor B, would you like to close us out or start to close us out with some tips from your perspective for our kids, just opening them up to asking any questions, feeling comfortable speaking to the adults around them. Did you want to speak a little to that?
I think one of the biggest things we can say is give them permission to open up. Like you have permission to bring your whole self to a conversation with your parents or with adults. Um, it's funny, we just dealt with Thursday, we dealt with this idea of seeking self-care, and part of this false sense of always having to be on the job, always having to be in attendance, never understanding this idea that some days you just need to, as Brianna said, disconnect. Like, okay, I'll miss class, right? But what I'll gain from missing class and reconnecting or reconstructing my mental health will help me in future classes. So providing that. The men met the other day and they're going to do a night out for the boys or for the video gamers. I know, Steve, right? You talked about video gaming, but what we found in this season is that that's the only communication that many of them have through their ability to game across networks. They're talking and they're having social conversations and they're problem solving online in groups. So we're doing that in May. One of our youth, Lanice, just brought the vision boards back that the children and youth did last year. And how different would it be to process vision boards now, right? Because a lot of their visions didn't come to pass because of pandemic. So how if they sat down again? So that's hopefully something our youth ministry will be looking at doing, since we're able to come back and gather in some safe formulation in public and take it off Zoom, right? So we're going to do some things because our youth numbers and our space gives us the ability to bring them in and still socially distance them, to be able to do some community, some koinonia, some relationship building. So I think just students, children, youth, just know we hear your voice, and we want to hear your voice, and we want to hear your heart. And forgive us if we've improperly managed past moments, right? I need you to forgive us if we improperly managed past moments where you wanted to share and we shut you down. We didn't know any better, right? We apologize, but don't hold that against us from future opportunities to share.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. Thank you for that, Pastor B. I want to mention just a resource. Of course, you can go to 360wholeness.org to get resources on managing stress, communicating with your kids. That's our website, Family Restoration and Healing Center's website. Again, 360wholeness.org. I understand that, yes, parents are working really hard to raise their children, communicate with them. When you're yourselves are dealing with a lot, you yourselves are needing help. Of course, you can reach out to our partners at Safe Harbor Christian Counseling and Nilu Therapeutics. We'll provide that information in the chat. Also, you could find it on our website, 360wholeness.org. But just for another resource, there's the National Helpline that you can access or provide and to others, friends, to access, and that's the SAMHSA National Helpline at 1-800-662-HELP. There's also a website where you can just go in and put prayer requests. It's called How May I Pray For You.org. If you just want to send in a prayer request, and there's a team of people to pray for you at howmayIprayforyou.org. So this has been so awesome. Thanks again. I know, we're trying to wrap it up, but it's such good conversation. It looks like we don't have any additional questions. So I just want to thank everyone again. Thank you, Pastor Bradford, for letting us have this time to talk with your congregation and give great tips. Thanks again, Steve and Tamia and Brianna. I appreciate you all and hope that everyone has an awesome day today. Thank you.
Thank you.